Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello, welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast from the Football Grad Network. I'm your host, Bryce Dunn. And joining me, as always, is Chris Williams. Chris, how are you?
Bryce, I'm very well, thank you. Welcome back from your hiatus.
Yeah, that was on the last pod, wasn't it?
Do you know, it's been so long because I haven't seen any football. I couldn't remember if you were away or not. But you're always away. You're away this weekend, aren't you?
I was away this weekend, but I didn't miss a podcast, I don't believe. But I've definitely left a part of me behind on that trip, I think.
Just ignore me. It's the international break. I don't know what day it is when there's no club football on.
Oh, I know. And I have a feeling the first part of this podcast, I'm going to hope that we weren't talking about international football more than ever. And on that note, joining Chris and I is Veth. Manu, how are you?
Why are we not talking about international football? That's the best part. I mean, you were hyping it up so much in the last few days.
Well, you know, it was unlucky. I don't know. Maybe it was the refs. I mean, there's a lot of things, you know, that swayed it against us, I feel, you know. But we've covered that now. So let's just move on. It's fine. So the Bundesliga. Okay, no, of course we've got to talk about the World Cup qualification, and obviously being a German football podcast, we're going to have to talk about it. And unfortunately, they managed to beat my home nation in Northern Ireland 3-1 in Belfast. And yeah, I'll hold my hands up and I'll say, well done, Germany. It's been a fantastic qualifying campaign, and they thoroughly deserved that victory. Manu, the stage is yours.
Yeah, I was a bit upset because I tipped 3-0 for this game in my preview, and you guys mucked it up for me. Last minute, who was it? Who scored the last goal? Oh, I should have read Chris Weir's match report a bit more closely.
I've tried to blank it out, so I can't even help you.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, one of you lads messed up my preview by 1 goal. No, but what a campaign it has been. I was optimistic that, you know, we qualify. We always tend to qualify. I think we've always qualified if we were allowed to go into qualification, because a couple of times we weren't because various world wars and all that. But whenever we were allowed to go politically, we did qualify for this tournament. But this has been the most convincing I've ever seen a qualification tournament. The goal difference, 10 out of 10 games won. The goal difference was 43-4. That's a goal average of 4.3 per game. And that's, you know, of course, San Marino were in this group, but I mean, there's some other results in there that were just incredible, including the 5-1 against Azerbaijan. There was a 6-0 against Norway. It was an incredible campaign all around, and really difficult to find anything critical about this campaign, even though Joachim Löw seems to be trying very hard to find something to criticize. But I mean, curious to hear. I mean, Chris, you're not German, so you probably look at it a bit different. But is there anything to criticize when you see something like this?
Not really. I think the only ropey match out of the whole qualification format was the game away in the Czech Republic, and, you know, Germany won. So if you're going to play, it didn't play particularly badly that night, but it wasn't on a par with, some of the other games we've seen, the 7-0 in San Marino, the 6-0 at home against Norway. It wasn't on a par with that. So if you're going to play off par one night and win 2-1, I think there's many teams across the world who would take that result. So I can understand why Joachim Löw is probably saying this. He doesn't want to talk up, the chances too much. You're defending world champions at the moment. You've had an unbelievable qualifier, 10 games, 1 out of 10. As you've said, a plus 39, 30 points. So that's unbelievable. So he would be well within his right at the press conference to say, we've absolutely smashed qualifications and we're the reigning world champions and everybody should fear us and we're probably going to win it back to back. Now, if he said that, he would be told, you're too arrogant. So maybe he's gone a little bit too far the other way, but, Germany must be top favourites for this competition. And as Bryce has already said, the first team can win it. I'm not being funny that it was almost a second team, and that's no disrespect to anyone that played. It was almost a second team that played in the Confederations Cup, and that was done at a walking pace. So, if I was a national German guy and I was a massive German national fan, then I'd be quietly confident that we'd win the World Cup again.
Yeah, I am too. I think that on paper they should be winning it, and I can't really see any other country that has this quite depth. There's a couple that are close, that have very strong squads on and can do it on a given day, could beat Germany, and that is really the thing that worries me about any tournament. Really is that every playoff match is a one-off. Once you get out of the group, it's a one-off, and we saw it in France in 2016. I think that Germany squad was hands down the best team in the tournament as well. And they had one off day, one mistake by Bastian Schweinsteiger in the box, and it was gone. The title was gone. And that is always the risk. And that's why I say, on paper, if it was a league table, then, they would want to walk away with it easily, because when you look at the league format, you can have a mistake, you can lose a game, and you can still walk away with the title. So that's really the only thing that I could see happening, is that, one bad day in the office, it's such a fine margin, isn't it? At the World Cup, you know the teams that can win it, but you can always have a slip up, and that will change everything. So are Germany the favorites? Yes, absolutely, 100%. I mean, I saw them at the Confed Cup and walking pace. Chris, you're quite right. They were so confident, and they didn't play. A lot of people that I speak to, especially a lot of the audience based in England, they say, well, this is a Mickey Mouse tournament. Well, Portugal and Chile sent their number one squads to this tournament, and they were reigning continental champions. They took this tournament very serious. And Germany still went there and won it. So I think I don't think the countries that went there did not take it serious. And, when you went there and you saw how they played and, how important everyone took the tournament, I think you see that. So I think you're quite right. I think the only problem is, it's a World Cup and something can always go wrong any given night.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Manu. I would have to say that Mexico would have sent, they did send an A team and send a B team to the Gold Cup as well. So there was another nation taking it very seriously and wanted to get the better of Germany, but they came up against a far superior side. If we just talk about the qualifications as well, let's talk about the players on the pitch. I mean, obviously, Löw's going to have a hell of a decision as to who to bring. He's almost got too many players, for the size of squad that you're allowed to take with you. But, Manu, for you, who stood out for Germany maybe in the last two games? I must say, even beyond the two games, I think Kimmich has had a fantastic campaign for them, and I believe he set a record for assists in getting 9.
Yeah, he did, and what a transformation he has undergone. He's maybe the only Bayern player on 100% form right now. He's still young, 21, 22, and he's already a leader. I think he captained the team for some time even against Azerbaijan. So that's outstanding. I think when you look at his development, it's incredible, really. I mean, he's basically made it possible for Germany to go into transition without Philipp Lahm, and we thought we wouldn't find a player that quickly, and we have. And I remember when Bayern first signed him, and I thought, well, here's going to be a player who's not going to get very much playing time at all, and he starts for them every single game now. Even under Guardiola, and Guardiola used him as a centre back at times, and he took that position very well as well. And he's such a multi-talent who can play so many positions and can play them so well, and it's already at a young age has a lot of leadership qualities. And I think that's really something that surprised people over the last 4 years. When you look at his development over the last 4 years. We all knew that he was a massive talent, but that he can step into a leadership role like that so fast is, I think, quite outstanding. And, he's already played 24 games for the German national team. That's quite a decent number, considering how young he still is. So, yeah, he stood out for me. I think Goretzka stood out for me in the last game, as did Leroy Sané. Those are two guys that I think, will make the squad for the World Cup. And a guy who stood out for me in the last two games as well is Sandro Wagner. I think he's going to be a real problem for Mario Gomez. Because Sandro Wagner and Mario Gomez are similar types of forwards, but that second goal against Northern Ireland, the way he scored it outside the box, with real power, he's a little bit of a late bloomer, but he's been fantastic. And Chris, he's someone that we have watched quite closely since we started this pod, really, because he is quite a strong striker.
Yeah, he is. The only thing I would say is I thought he had a disappointing Confederations Cup, but then he had a long season. So he's come up with the goods recently, hasn't he? I mean, obviously banged a hat-trick away against San Marino not too long ago. So yeah, I'll be keen to see how he gets on in a big tournament, but it would be so hard if you said now pick a squad to go away. There's players who you're going to be leaving out who you think, how am I going to leave those out? So it's going to be a really difficult decision for him, and I wouldn't be surprised probably if Mario Götze loses out, because although we all know what a great talent he is, and what he did in the last World Cup, his goal in essence, he hasn't been playing as much. I don't know if he's mentally ready for it, and there's people who are mentally ready for it. And I mean, if you just look at some of the formations that Germany have played, they've gone 3 at the back, they've gone 4 at the back. I mean, when they've gone 3 at the back, Rudiger's not playing. He's a fantastic player for me. He's coming in when there's 4 at the back. Stindl's there, Draxler's there. And we can even go and win 6 and 7-0 with Timo Werner not being on the pitch. There's, as Bryce has said, there seems to be a plethora of options in the background. So, if you're short on midfielders, well, it doesn't really matter because Younes is there, or Chan's there, or Goretzka's there, or Brandt's there, or Draxler's there. Or we're short on, defenders. Well, Mustafi's there, Hector's there, Kimmich is there, Ginz is there, Hummels is there, of course, Sula's there. There's just a really big choice throughout the depth. And everyone's going, Manuel Neuer's a massive loss for Bayern, is a massive loss for Germany. But then in comes Marc-Andre ter Stegen, who's Barcelona's goalkeeper. So it just seems that there is a constant world-class player available for every position, even when one of the other world-class players is injured.
Yeah, that's really the puzzle pieces, right? I think that's almost the hardest task. How are you going to make them all fit together? I don't want to be in his shoes come, I guess, next May, when he has to put it all together. There's going to be a lot of disappointments. You mentioned Götze. He's going to be back in November. That's what Löw has said. So, but you're quite right. He could miss out on that squad, as could everyone else you just mentioned. I think it's going to be very difficult for him.
Well, I mean, do you think that Löw possibly has his first 11 wrote out, or maybe his squad roughly wrote out? Or do you think players could really sway his decision, in the next few months in the league, Chris?
Well, I think there's always time for someone to stake a claim, but if we're going to look at, potentially who the first choice defenders are, Hummels is in there definitely. Kimmich, you've already said. Sula can make an argument. Ginter has been able to play there, played against the Czech Republic. It's just going to be, it's difficult. It's difficult for anybody. I would say, Bryce, it's pretty difficult for anybody new to break through, because even if someone has an absolute blinder out of left field now, someone who you don't even expect, there's so many people in that pecking order. If you just look at centre forwards, there's Werner, Stindl, Gomez. There's just so many. Muller can even play there if he had to. There's just so much talent in there that I think for anybody new to come and break through, it would take something serious to either push out Wagner, Werner, Stindl, or even Götze if he gets the chance or the possibility, or Gomez, sorry.
Yeah, Bryce, about 8 years ago, you could have come in as an 18-year-old into the Bundesliga and played 10, 12 really good games, and you would have made that squad. Now, there's no way. Even like a super talent comes in and plays a fantastic set of games. The established 22-plus-year-olds, the list is already long. I mean, there's 50 players on the list. And, it would be very difficult for anyone that we don't have on the radar now to make that squad.
Yeah, I think it's incredible just the amount of players that they have, especially when, like said, Chris, yourself started listing them all. You end up going, oh yeah. I mean, I think any nation in the world would be happy to have maybe half the choices that they do have. But Manu, Lowe has come out and been a bit critical towards the Bundesliga and their lack of success in Europe. What exactly has happened here, and what can maybe the Bundesliga do about this?
Yeah, this has been a long debate. I guess we had this debate in our last podcast too, of the 6 defeats in 6 games. We analyzed it in many ways, and I think Chris is quite right with his analysis that it's currently, you can make a case saying, look, the 6 teams, there were 6 good reasons why they lost. And in 3 cases, that's directly to the teams being new to the international competitions. I think what Löw means, it's more the long term, the lack of international titles. And it's not really the Champions League. I just typed up an article on this just before this podcast. And the Bundesliga does actually, when you take Spain out of the equation in the new millennia, and this is what Löw has said since 2000, there has been 17 Champions League winners, and 9 of them came from Spain, and 2 of them came from Italy, 2 of them came from Germany, and 3 of them came from England. Now, when you look at it that way, the Bundesliga has not done very well, but neither have England and Italy. And actually, in England and Italy, it looks way worse than it does for Germany, because when we look at the Premier League and the amount of money that's available there, 3 different Champions League winners is a huge disappointment, I would say, for the world's richest league. Spain, on the other hand, I mean, they have dominated European football, and I think it's not crazy to say that the La Liga is probably the best in the world, because when you look at the Europa League, it's very similar. They've dominated that competition as well, which means that they're first, not only their first tier teams, but also their second tier teams. But I think that Löw, that's really what Löw is getting at, is the fact that the teams in the Champions League, that's one thing, big money teams, that losing to PSG, Real, and that can happen, right? But I think it's the Europa League that the second tier teams, German teams, are not doing what needs to be done to win titles, because he believes that winning titles for the club and being competitive with the club will translate into national team success. And I think he has a very good point, saying that, if you want to be the best league in the world, and that is the standard that the Bundesliga wants to be, and they're not right now. They're not the best league. It's La Liga. And if they want to be on that level, it's all great to have beautiful stadiums, have them full, and have all the talented players, but you also have to have a mentality of success. And that's something that he doesn't see. And I think that is something that worries him. I think, and that's something that personally worries me too, is the mentality, that the smaller clubs often have, that they focus too much almost on making money and building players, producing these really great talents. And the abundance of talent that we have is one of those results. We have so many talented players, but small clubs will make these talents and sell them. And, that happens in Spain, of course, as well. But when you look at Atletico Bilbao, Sevilla, they often have 2 or 3 players that you can identify with, that they will not sell. And I think that the smaller Bundesliga teams have to kind of, developing stars and selling them is great, but they also have to maybe just hang on to them a little bit longer. And I think Löw wants to see more depth in the Bundesliga and more depth all around, and see more teams do better, because it will translate to more success for the national team. And I think it's a trend that worries him, because he always looks 4 or 5 years ahead, right, to the next World Cup. We might be competitive now, but the other countries are not sleeping. So I think that's really what he's getting at. It's something that has to be kept in mind in order for the national team now also not to fall behind in the long term.
Yeah, you mentioned, Manuel, about the smaller clubs trying to hold on to players. Is it not a bit of a tricky one, because that comes with having enough money to keep these players as well? Because as we've seen numerous times in different leagues, when a player says he wants to leave, it can be very tricky to hold on to him unless you have an endless amount of cash.
Yeah, that's one of the big issues. But the Bundesliga is not a poor league. It's not as rich as the Premier League, of course, but it has the second, the third largest television deal in European football behind La Liga, and it's almost level with La Liga. And when you put an advertisement into the account, the average team in the Bundesliga actually has more money than the average team in Spain. So the money is there, and I think it's a bit of a mentality problem in Germany, that every team is saying, okay, well, we can't really beat Bayern, so we're just gonna become a feeder team for either Bayern, or in order to get it to the level to Bayern we have to always sell every year our star player. Well, that's great, and that might fill your bank account, but it's not going to win you titles. And it also means that a team like Freiburg, finish in the Europa League and they sell 2 or 3 of their star players, that's going to hurt them. And Hoffenheim, similar scenario, although, domestically they're doing well. Internationally, they're really hurting because Rudi and Süle are gone, because they sold them to Bayern. And I think that is something that the league has to look at. And one of the things that maybe the league needs to look at, and this is something the Premier League does so well, is even television distribution. In the Bundesliga, the television distribution isn't quite as even as in the Premier League. So I think that's one of the many issues. We can talk about this all day, but Chris, you're always a big defender of the league and its model, and I think you were 100% right. But you can always do better, and I think that's really what Löw means, right?
Yeah, most definitely, and we all know why the Bundesliga is loved throughout the world, and that's by people who don't even watch it. They love the atmosphere that goes with it. They see it on YouTube clips, they see it on social media clips, and they go, well, why can't our league be like that? And that's not just in England, that's from all over, but it's predominantly from England, and that's why there's thousands of English people flying over to Germany week in, week out to watch football games. But I think you are quite right. It's the distribution of the money which has made English teams be able to go on a even footing. That's why we've got the likes of Stoke City signing quality players. I couldn't see Augsburg signing an Arnautovic equivalent when they did at that time. I couldn't see them signing a player from a World Cup winning squad, which would happen in the Premier League, even the way down to maybe the bottom 3 up. And that's what would make the league better, the Bundesliga. Not an influx of foreign players, just an ability for those who are classed as middle to lower sides to be able to fight on an even keel and to take more of a fight to the top 4. And I do think, like you, Mano, that's what he's getting on about. And he's certainly getting on about the disappointing way in which the Europa League's been looked at this year. And we can look at Freiburg, who went out in the qualifying rounds, didn't even get to the Europa League playoff stage or even the group stage. Cologne have had a nightmare in the groups. Hertha Berlin are just playing, Hertha Berlin style football. And that's where I'm a big believer in the Europa League. I think it's an undervalued trophy. I think if you are in it and you get lots of European experience, then eventually when either you win it and qualify for the Champions League, or you do what Hoffenheim did and you finish really high one season and you qualify for the Champions League, you've got all that experience. And I'm just sitting on the fence a little bit because I think there's 3 or 4 sides that don't have the right amount of European experience at the moment from Germany. And will they get it again? Not really sure, because you've got the likes of Bayer Leverkusen, Gladbach and Schalke, who traditionally have that experience. They'll be looking to get back in next season. So I'm going to say what I did last week, and I know you've already alluded to it, Manu, but I think if those 3 teams are in Europe, I don't think Lowe's got as much complaint to maybe chat about.
Yeah, Rudi Völler actually said exactly the same thing in Kicker. He had a column in Kicker, and he basically said exactly the same. Let's don't make it worse than it actually is. It's one match day. It was bound to happen eventually. The product is still strong, but I think you can always improve on the product, and I think that's something that the Bundesliga, all the managers of the Bundesliga this week talked about: salary caps and European football, and restricting transfer amounts, and restricting the amount of money investors can bring in international football. Well, start at your league first. Make sure that every team, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it can't be that Bayern gets, what was it last year? They got 3 times as much television money than Leipzig. No, that can't be. That needs to end. Everyone needs to be on even footing so that the rich don't become richer all the time. So that, someone like we had in 1998 when Kaiserslautern won the league, promoted straight up, won the league. So you want that. You want stories like that. You want a story like Leicester. Of course, it doesn't happen every year, but you need to be able to give teams more breathing room, and to also say no to Bayern when they come knocking on the door and say like, oh, we want this guy from your squad and this guy from your squad, and saying, no, we don't need to sell. So I think that is something that needs to be improved in the league. Just look at the television distribution before you yabbing about salary caps and luxury taxes and all that stuff that they have in North America. Look at your own league and see how you can improve your own product and put everyone on an even footing before you look at the European football.
Okay, well, let's move on to the Bundesliga and move away from the international break. That's done now. We've got an exciting weekend ahead, and we're going to talk about one of the sides that did contribute towards that per European match day in Bayern Munich. We're going to talk about their new manager, or old manager. New of old, I don't really know. But Jupp Heynckes is returning to the club for his 4th stint. He left previously after winning the very famous treble. And Manu, let's go to you on this. Before you explain just what type of manager he is, what type of coach, sorry, explain. We obviously spoke about Tuchel possibly coming in, Nagelsmann coming in. Some people were saying Klopp. What actually happened towards the end, and how come they've given him his 4th stint?
So I did actually an hour-long podcast with Mirsan Roth on Thursday. So this is how long you can talk about the subject. I'll try to do it a little bit briefer. So now Bayern did talk to Tuchel, and they were quite far on that subject. But the big sticking point was that Tuchel, there were some issues that Rummenigge and Hoeneß wanted 2 different candidates. Rummenigge, Tuchel, Hoeneß, Nagelsmann. Tuchel was available right away. Nagelsmann is not available, period. He might not be available next summer either. We'll get to that in a moment. But Tuchel also wanted to end Robben's and Ribéry's time by next summer. Now you sign a coach and you want to have the one thing that Bayern need right now is stability. They need stability to see out the season. And I know we're only 7 match days in, but that is the point that Bayern at. They feel like they need to just stabilize the boat. Now you bring in Tuchel, and everyone knows that Tuchel is going to kick out Ribéry and Robben. And that's going to be over the heads of everyone for 27 match days, plus the Champions League, plus the Cup. That's disaster programmed. You just know that's not going to go well. So they had very heavy doubts about that, especially because the press knew about it. People were talking about that. He brought in a whole bunch of other demands. Another demand by Tuchel was 100% control over personalities. Any player brought in or sold or bought, he wanted 100% control. As I said on Mirsan Roth, that is something that Bayern need to do eventually anyways, because Heynckes and Rummenigge are getting on in age. They need to think about bringing in a successor, but because Rummenigge and Heynckes did not agree whether Tuchel was that man, there was conflict within. So they basically had a discussion with each other. Rummenigge and Heynckes did. They said in a press conference publicly that there had been issues between the two. And they basically brought in a stopgap measurement in Jupp Heynckes, a 70-year-old coach who they know has the experience, who won the treble, as you said, to steady the boat. Now, there is a lot of risk in that. Heynckes hasn't managed in 4 years. The times have changed. He did bring in his assistant from Hermann, who Bayern had to pay money for to get him from Düsseldorf. He was the assistant coach there. So he did bring in someone who has been coaching, but it's in some regards it's an appointment that makes sense in terms of stabilizing the boat, but it's not exactly an inspiring appointment, isn't it, Chris? I mean, it's a little bit like, well, we didn't know what to do, so we just brought in Heynckes, and this is for the fourth time that they brought him back.
Yeah, I mean, we all talked about the, what's the right word for it? The egos, maybe a little bit of prima donna-ishness that goes on in the Bayern dressing room. Obviously, we've seen why Ancelotti was gone. There's a main reason for that, and that's because the players didn't want him there. And yeah, I think that there's some older generation of players in that dressing room who all want different things. And if they were to bring in one of those people and the others didn't like it, there would have been loads of trouble. So this is a convenient appointment. It's a safe appointment, probably at a time when they needed to go a little more risky. If I was going to put in a bit more business speak, I'd say that Bayern have been a little bit risk averse here. They've gone with the safest option, which at the moment might not be the correct option. Let's have a look at the teams around them have gone for maybe not necessarily the young manager. Bosch isn't as young as Nagelsmann, for instance, but Dortmund threw away the shell of what was safe for them, and they went and took a chance on someone who was basically unproven at a time when maybe they needed a big proven manager to come in and steer Dortmund back to a side where they needed to be. They took a risk. German teams are forever taking risks. I think that maybe Bayern Munich could have taken a little bit more of a risk here. And it's always dangerous when you get somebody who's done so well. I mean, really, let's look back. No one expected that treble in that season when it came, and it was handed over to Guardiola, and he was supposed to take that team on. That's not really happened. Ancelotti came in, he was supposed to take that team on. It's not really happened either, has it? Those European Cups, the Bundesliga trophy and the Pokal have not been seen together since he's left at Bayern Munich. So it's too safe for me. And maybe it gets them to the end of the season, and as long as they get top four, maybe they've already thought that the title's out of their reach this season already with Dortmund flying. You don't really know, but it's not the risk that I would have liked to see. It's very safe, and if you bring him in, what's he going to do? Now, he might completely blow me away, and they're going to go out and win the league and be 15, 20 points clear, and then I'll have to eat my hat at the end of the season. But at the moment, it looks like a safe appointment for me at a time when maybe they needed to take a little bit more of a risk and bring themselves back.
It's a bit of a nostalgic appointment almost.
Yeah, there's a lot of problem with nostalgic appointments, and people call for it all the time. And it's not necessarily the right one, because you do look back with rose-tinted spectacles and, he's won a treble, and no one's going to take that away. And previously, he's won, titles and all sorts in the time he's gone before. But what happens if it goes wrong now? Is that legacy tainted? I think that's always a worry.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of my big worries, because he did all of this 4 years ago. Look, 4 years ago, Ribéry was 30 and Robben was 29. They were at the peak, and he's basically, it's almost like he's taking over the same squad. Yes, Hummels is in there, and Kimmich, because Philipp Lahm is gone, right? Rudy, of course, is in for Alonso. Although that was after, Heynckes left. So there hasn't really been a huge change in the side. And that is something that, as a Bayern fan, would get me worried that, he's 4 years on and not that much has changed, but football has changed enormously. It's a very different game. When Heynckes left, the main formation was 4-2-3-1. Now most Bundesliga teams play with 3 in the back and 2 forwards. Bayern don't even have a second forward. They have Lewandowski, and that's it. So, there's all these issues. The way the side is built, you can't, even with the old manager, you can't reproduce this. What they need is massive change. And I get that you can't do that at this point of the season, because the transfer window is closed. We're 7 days into a game, and I think that what they're trying to do is to basically stabilize the situation, because they realized that they made a big mistake last summer when they did not fire Ancelotti. And I mean, I think looking back, you could sense that things were going wrong at Bayern. Remember, we did the podcast, Chris, was it in August when they were in China, and everything just went down south for them, and we were saying, well, this is not working. And that would have been, for me, the time when you're like, well, obviously it's not. We can still repair this. That's when they should have made the change.
Yeah, they should have done, and it went from bad to worse from there, didn't it? There was a problem in China, then they were embarrassed in their own tournament. And realistically, we were talking about this I'd probably say all the way back in February time, so we could see it. I would have expected that if Bayern are going to make the change now, a few match days in, they must have had a feeling that it wasn't going right, even in the back of their mind, even if we know it was a bit of a snap decision, and it came off the back of the PSG game, and it came off the back of the players not being happy. But these things don't just turn overnight. It's been a long process, and for me, then maybe they should have acted at the end of last season, in May time, or even June the latest, and changed the manager, and they wouldn't have had the problem now. They're trying to look around and find someone who fits the glove to make everybody happy, and some of those players who they're going to have to make happy, they won't even be there in 18 months. So that's what I'm saying. They need to probably take a little bit more of a risk, maybe speak to those players who are not particularly happy and say, look, really sorry, you're in the twilight career. Ian Robbins retired from international football as we speak now, about 10 minutes ago as we record. So his time in the game's not going to be that far left. And they should be looking to the likes of Süle and Rudy, not for who do you want to be your manager, but they should be looking towards those types of guys. Serge Gnabry again. They're the players that are going to drive Bayern on in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons, and they need a manager that's going to replicate that. And I think maybe they've bottled that decision.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, can I just ask, would you put your money on coming in the summer, and who actually is going to be the best manager to take them forward? Obviously, an 1860 fan, a Dortmund fan, but who's best for Bayern Munich?
Oh, yeah. This is a real difficult one, Bryce. I'm not sure Nagelsmann is ready for Bayern. I think he would be tactically the best because he can bring in that 3-5-2, but so could Tuchel. So I'm just not sure whether Nagelsmann is the right choice. And the problem is that Rummenigge and Hoeneß disagree on Nagelsmann. Rummenigge thinks that Nagelsmann is too inexperienced, and Hoeneß, apparently, from what I've heard, sees something in himself in Nagelsmann. Now, for those who don't know, Hoeneß had to retire at the age of 27, and he became what we call in German manager of Bayern, right? So the sporting director at the age of 27, and he built Bayern as we know it today from then onwards, right? So he looks at Nagelsmann and he sees himself. And there is something quite risky about that, I think, and Rummenigge sees that. But these two they're disagreeing on that. And I personally, I don't often agree with Rummenigge, but I think he might be right. Because if Bayern hire Nagelsmann at the age of 31, because, and something goes wrong, they're going to burn that guy. They're going to burn the potential that he has as a manager, and he's still going to be available for them 4 or 5 years down the road. And I think it would be a smarter decision to go with someone like Tuchel. Couple other names that you hear all the time is Klopp for next summer, and Joachim Löw also for next summer. Should Germany win the World Cup, Löw could come in. Now those are proven managers that could reform the side, right? I'm not saying that these are the guys that are going to come in, but that's the kind of guys that Rummenigge wants to see. So my money wouldn't be necessarily on Nagelsmann, but he's definitely an option. And it's the same with Tuchel. I think that could be another hot topic come August. I know that Bayern don't actually know what they're going to do next summer. That is the one thing that's certain. They don't actually know.
Yeah, well, all eyes are going to be on that game over the weekend as they are at home to Freiburg. But the biggest game, you'd have to say, over the weekend is going to be Dortmund taking on RB Leipzig. Chris, the last time the two teams met, there was a bit of trouble, wasn't there? Dortmund fans, misbehaved, and a bit aggressively towards the Leipzig fans. But hopefully, this type of thing won't happen again. What should we see on the pitch then? Both sides very attacking, as we know. What way do you see it going?
Well, to say they misbehaved would be probably a massive understatement. It wasn't the best of scenes, and potentially because it was on, just normal people who'd gone to watch a football match. It wasn't, any sort of elements fighting each other. So hopefully we won't see that again. But on the pitch, wow, Dortmund are flying. We all know that domestically they're flying. In Europe, they're having a bit of a harder time. But domestically, they're flying. They're knocking goals in for fun. And Leipzig are on the rise. A little bit of a shaky start, but now they're in fourth. They're on 13 points. They'll be looking for that win. If the results go the right way for them this weekend, they could find themselves second with a win at Signal Iduna Park. So they will approach it with, I would say, their normal verve, the way they approach every game. They look to attack. It's going to be such a good game, and we've seen lots of stuff happening on the sides, and we saw a lot last season. Some of the shenanigans on the side with the managers, which was great to see. It's always now, since Leipzig have been promoted, it's a bit of a good fixture. The very first meeting together was a stormer of a meeting, and then we had last season for the game that we're going to have here in Dortmund was another good game. I think we're going to be installed. It's a Saturday evening game. It's a 5:30 game over here. It's going to be an excellent game, and one we're all going to wait and see. And I'm not going to try and predict this game. I think that at the moment it can go either way, which is a horrendous thing to say as a journalist. Well, I don't really know which way it's going to go, but one of them's going to win. Is pretty much what I've said. But it's one of those games that can literally go any way because the stakes are high for both sides at the moment. I'm going to be really interested how Bosch approaches it, whether he sticks with the 4-3-3, whether he plays his Dortmund way and he expects Leipzig to have a little bit of a change of variation, or whether he's just going to pull something out of the bag for us all to be a little bit surprised about.
And Manu, just quickly, what way do you see the game going? Obviously, Chris was saying it's a hard one to call. Do you see Dortmund having the upper hand because they're sitting top, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I actually just wrote an article on this on Fußballstadt.com on what went wrong for the Bundesliga sides in Europe. And the one thing that I said about Dortmund is that Peter Bosch came in as a new manager, and he brought in a completely different style of football than Tuchel played. Tuchel, of course, often played with that 3-4-3 or this 3-5-2. And very much ball possession oriented and a bit more, hanging back, a bit more defensively. And Peter Bosch, of course, he's known for that Ajax style of football, the 4-3-3, very attacking, high line, very, very risky, especially if you haven't played it if you haven't played it for a long time. And the thing that I pointed out with Dortmund is the reason why they're flying high in the league, is because they had a little bit of a good schedule for them domestically. The teams that they face domestically haven't really been able to challenge them and challenge that high line quite as well as one of the very top teams could in the Bundesliga. Now, against Tottenham, they were found out. They actually on paper dominated that game, but the defensive high line was found out, and Real Madrid did something very similar to them. So this is basically their third try this season against a top team to play the system. And I'm very curious to see if it's finally clicking, because we all knew that this is going to happen. Bosch said in a press conference, I think in the beginning of the season, we are going to lose some games by a high margin. It's going to happen because the system that I want to play is risky. And once it's clicking, it will bring us a lot of success. But every once in a while, especially in the beginning, there will be results that will look really bad. And we had 2 of those results already. And I'm really curious to see. And this is maybe the thing that I'm looking the most forward to in this game. Have they learned from their mistakes against Tottenham and Real Madrid defensively? Attacking wise, I have no worries at all because Leipzig's defense is very young, very inexperienced. So I think I'm not worried about that at all. But Leipzig are going to press high. Hasenhüttl is a very intelligent coach. He knows exactly where the weaknesses are in Dortmund's side. His high pressing machine is going to really try to hurt them. Timo Werner is back for this game as well, so that's going to be a massive worry for them. So I think that is the number one thing I'm looking forward to. And I think, Chris, this is their first test in the Bundesliga. When you look at all the games that they had, this is the first time they're facing a top side.
Yeah, it is most definitely, and that's why I'll be interested, like you will, to see how the back four cope, because they didn't cope at all against Real Madrid, really. Obviously, I was there for the Tottenham game in the press box, and yeah, you were right. They bossed the possession, but they were just torn apart down the right-hand side that night. Kane and Son just tore them apart, and Piszczek, Socrates, Toprak just didn't have the best of games. And I don't think it helped that the midfield that night, so Kagawa, Sahin and Dahoud, didn't particularly gel until I think it was about 15, 20 minutes. And of course, we'd had a glut of goals by then. It was 2-1 after 15 minutes, and the midfield hadn't even really settled down. So I'll be interested to see how they cope, like you've already said, with that high press, because we all know, and we all saw the other week, what Timo Werner can do with even what looks to be a half-placed ball out the back. He can just get onto that and drive at goal and drive against defenders and dispatch the ball from outside the area into the top corner if he has to. And he's a man that's in excellent form. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge. And this might be the game. This might be the game, Manu, where they lose by a high amount, and it will be how do they bounce back for that. But then subsequently, are Leipzig going to be at full strength? International break comes at a good time for no one, really. So we'll have to wait and see which one it's favoured, the pair of.
I'm excited for this game. I really am, because I think there's a lot of question marks about both sides, because we haven't really seen the best from Leipzig yet either. They have been so fluctuating in Europe and in the Bundesliga. And I'm really curious to see how they're going to handle this game as well. So it's going to be, obviously it's the top game, but it's going to be a game I think it's going to answer a lot of questions about where the season is going to go for both of them. This is, of course, match day 8. And that's when we get into that region where we can say, well, this is how the league could look like, right? Chris, you often mention that magic number 10, right? That's usually when you can see, okay, this is maybe where it's going to go.
Yeah, I'll completely go along with that. It's going to be interesting. We're getting towards that number now, aren't we? So, the league will start to settle down. It's normally, for me, Manu, is when it starts to get cold. I've got a couple of friends over in Germany, and I've seen on Facebook this week that they are starting to wear hats and gloves. So I think it's time we probably started looking at the table.
Yeah, okay, well, getting cold. Don't remind me of that. I've just come back from San Francisco where I had 26 degrees Celsius every day. It's going to be hard enough to adjust to my winter, which is almost non-existent, but I'm going to be back in Germany in a month, and yeah, hats and gloves. I shudder to think about that.
Yeah, and boy, does it get cold there by the signs of things. But guys, let's look at one of the other fixtures. Definitely towards the other end of the table, as the weekend begins with Stuttgart taking on Cologne. Cologne, as we've covered quite a few times on the podcast, they've had an absolute nightmare of a season so far, yet in Europe, but also the league as well. And things are not going to be helped by, their main man up front in John Cordoba pulling up with a hamstring injury and now being out for 7 weeks. Chris, this is very much a must-win for Cologne, isn't it? I mean, you spoke about us getting close to the 10 games, and if they haven't got a win in 10 games, yeah, things are going to be very difficult, going into the next parts of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when I start to look at the top of the table after 10 games. But if you're Cologne and you sat on the bottom with 1 point after 7, and the teams around them now, the gap's 3 points to Bremen, then, it's 6 points. That's 2 games to the teams where they could consider themselves getting a little bit out of safety, a little bit out of danger and back into safety. This is a massive game for them. And Stuttgart have dropped down a little recently. They're on 14th and they're on 7 points. So a win for them, and they will be jumping straight back up. Probably, you would imagine, if the results go for them on the match day, they could find themselves from 14th, probably round about 10th on the Sunday night after the Bremen-Gladbach game. So it'll be up for them there to get a good victory at home. We all know what their home ground's like and what their fans are like and how passionate it is. I'll be really interested to see obviously what the players have done, because they've either been on international duty or they've been on a little bit of a stand down or a break. But I'll be interested to see what the Cologne management, and I say all the coaches and the higher echelon of the staff, have got themselves together over the last couple of weeks and thought, how can we get ourselves out of this rut? No pun intended. But it is a rut that they're in, and it's getting to a real desperate stage for them now. It's exceptionally desperate. And yeah, you're right. They've had to bring in Pizarro, who, we spoke about this last time. He's a bit of an old guy, but he's going to revitalize that dressing room. John Cordoba, pardon the French, but it looks like he can't hit a cow's arse with a banjo at the moment. So that's going to have to change. I'm just hoping for them, because we all enjoyed watching them last year, and we all thought we were going to enjoy watching them this season, especially in the Europa League, and it's not happened yet. I'm hoping for them that it kicks on, that this little bit of a break, they've been able to revitalize the whole setup, and they'll come out fighting on the Friday night game, which obviously is live across the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. The Friday fixture always is. It's usually reserved for the big games. And I think this is a big game. 2 of Germany's heavy hitters going at each other in a game that means a lot. Stuttgart, in some ways, we spoke about Stuttgart before the season and looked at the squad, the players that they brought in, and we probably expected them to be there where Hannover is and be pretty much the other way around, right? And they have looked good in many of the games, but haven't produced the points to show for. And Köln is such an odd one for me, because I do think that they have the quality. I was one of those people that said they should, selling Modeste to take the money was the right decision. Now in retrospect, I think I was wrong. I think they should have done whatever it takes to keep him. I didn't think the hole would be that big for them, and obviously it is. I think Cordoba is a great forward, and in the long term will produce something for them. But I think it would have been better for him to be signing Cordoba and have Modeste at the same time, to have a more fluid transition. And I think that was a big loss for them, and they haven't been really able to cope with that. And now Cordoba is out for 7 weeks. Pizarro is probably going to play 39-year-old forward, and it's going to be such a desperate game. I think the one thing that strikes me is Peter Stöger, the head coach from Köln. He's such a cool customer. He doesn't doesn't seem to be worried about any of this very much. He's, we're just going to have to dig ourselves out of this grave and get the results. He's had a long interview with Kicker, and he seemed very confident that they can get the job done, and I think they can. I think they have the squad for it. I think they have a strong enough team to get the job done and get themselves out of this really deep hole.
Yeah, you talked about Stuger there, but how much longer would Cologne possibly hold on to Peter Stuger's? Somebody is going to have to go down, to blame for this. I would say.
This is a funny one. I don't think they will be served well by firing their coach. Köln is a club that's always been on the brink of chaos or in chaos. And that's because just the whole setup of the team. It's very emotional. And since Stöger has been there, it's been calm. And that's been one of the reasons they have been successful. And I think it's relatively calm in Köln now. You don't hear anything about any problems in the squad. You don't hear anything about management, etc. It might be going on, but behind closed doors. And that's a huge difference from now than it was before. And I think, if they fire the coach, then Pandora's box is opened, and this team will descend in the kind of chaos that we saw in the late 90s all the way up to Stöger's appointment. And I think that is maybe the one thing that they shouldn't do. I think they would not improve the results. It would probably make things worse. So, hanging on to Stöger. And I think, Chris, when you are in the relegation battle, displaying this kind of confidence and the calmness that he's displaying is exactly what you want to do, right?
Yeah, I would. They are rock bottom at the moment. And the last thing I would say they need to do at this very moment, is fire the head coach, because that will just leave a vacuum that will either be filled and everything will be okay, or it will just suck the life out of everything. You're quite right. They have got they've got some real good players there. Bittencourt, I like as a good player. Obviously, Lehmann is a captain for a reason. Osako, I like. Cordoba, if he just gets clicking, he can be fine. Obviously, Timo Horn, who I think is a great keeper, I've done for a few years. They've got everything there. They've got all the ingredients to be successful. It's just they're in a rut, and I would probably, if I was going to be employed for Cologne for the next season, I would look to give him until match day 15, maybe 16, and if it's not gone right, then I would look to change. And that's effectively what Wolfsburg did last season, wasn't it? They chopped just before the winter break, get someone in just before the winter break, and then they've got 2 weeks to get their stuff sorted out, get the way they want to play. If they want to bring anybody new in, they've got that time to do that. So I would look that if they are still rock bottom now, match day 15, Bryce, I will say that he's a dead man walking. But now I think would be a little bit too early, because simply who are they going to get to come in and lift the club? I will argue that Thomas Tuchel is not going to be interested, no matter what. And then they're looking to take a risk. Now, I've just said that Bayern Munich need to take a risk, but Bayern Munich are Bayern Munich. They've got the backing, they've got the cash, they've got the players. Cologne don't have that at the moment, and they don't need to take a risk when you're rock bottom of the league like they are. They need to just have a little bit of consistency and look to try and change it every single match day for a little bit of an improvement. So we're looking, can they pull a few draws together? Can they then make those draws into a couple of wins? Can those couple of wins then go back-to-back wins? And if they can do that, all of a sudden, in the next 7 or 8 matches, they've picked up 10 or 11 points. And all of a sudden, they're mid-table again. I think if they were to bring the axe down on him now, we could get to Christmas time and they could be looking at doing another axe job.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I would like to see Stuger stay on, if I'm honest. Let's just hope they can pull it around sooner rather than later. But guys, I think that more or less does it for this week. We'll do a bit of a plug and then we'll call it a day. Chris, what have you got going on this week or the coming week and you'd like to draw people's attention to?
Well, anybody that does follow me, thank you if you do, will notice that my Twitter's a bit quiet. So I've in essence started a new job and I'm massively busy at the moment. But we will have, or I will have, some Champions League and Europa League previews coming out in the next week or so. So keep an eye on that.
Sounds good. Manu, you're always busy. What have you got going on?
Yeah, the Champions League, Europa League previews, they're coming. Well, it's been, thick and fast. October is always a busy month. So they're coming Sunday, Monday. I think we're previewing 14 games altogether next week. So, look out for that. Then the Bundesliga previews, Dortmund, we're doing the Dortmund and the Bayern game as always. And, we have a really big story breaking on Football Grad. We once in a while work together with a company, with a group of journalists, from Romania that are part of the football leagues. So that article is coming out, will be out by the time this podcast is out on footballgrad.com. And it's about, player agencies, etc. So look out for that. And yeah, other than that, Football Grad podcast is back in action. We'll record that tomorrow. Golazzo is being recorded tomorrow. So tons going on, Bryce. Football Grad network is very busy.
Yeah, very much. You can head over there and see plenty of interesting articles, and the new podcasts will be out very soon. Guys, thanks for tuning in. If you could head over to iTunes, we'd really appreciate you doing a bit of a review or leave some positive comments on there. That would be great if you could. I've been your host, Bryce Dunn. You can find me on Twitter at BryceDunn11. And apart from that, enjoy the games over the weekend, and auf Wiedersehen.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen, dich abzuholen.
Danny Pellegrino here with a very merry, iconic podcast, here to tell you about AMC Plus. With Best Christmas Ever on AMC Plus, every day feels like Christmas morning. From new holiday favorites like Elf and one of my personal favorites, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, you can spend the holiday season opening up only the good stuff. Plus, you'll get a stocking stuffed with highly acclaimed AMC series like The Walking Dead and Mad Men, new series like Gangs of London and The Walking Dead World Beyond, and you're also getting your favorite iconic Christmas movies without having to search. AMC Plus is available on all your devices. AMC Plus, only the good stuff.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.